Welcome to Aligned in Authenticity, soul conversations on alignment, intuition, and living authentically. There's a version of life that we're taught that we're supposed to want: a good education, a stable career, a relationship that looks good and makes sense. And so we move forward in that direction, building what we're supposed to want until a shift happens and you realize the path you've been on, the things you've been building towards, the goals that you wanted, they're not what you actually want anymore. What once felt like success now feels out of alignment. Today, I want to talk about what it means when the life you were certain you wanted, you no longer want anymore, and what happens as that begins to unfold. So if you look at my previous videos, I've discussed that I went to school for fashion design, but that I have a degree in engineering. And I recall a time when I was in an engineering related job. I was working at a utility company in the operations area where there are very little women. And in the senior leadership ranks, there were basically no women of color. And as I was working there, I became very determined that I was going to climb the corporate ladder. And I was doing an amazing job at it. I was getting recognized, getting accolades, getting promoted from one position to another. And something happened. I realized that the more accolades I got, and the higher my titles got, the more empty and unfulfilled I felt inside. It was like one part of me was living and achieving, and the other part, the internal part of me, was completely disassociated from it. It was getting no satisfaction. I was getting no internal joy from anything that I was achieving. And I started to wonder what was wrong with me. This was what I wanted. I wanted to break the glass ceiling. Well, not just break the glass ceiling. I wanted to shatter it. I wanted to, climb and be an executive and get in the C-suite one day. It was all part of what I saw for myself. So when I started to feel no satisfaction, no joy, I started to honestly feel like I was being drained, and like I was watching myself live someone else's version of my life. And those are clear indications that the life that you're living is no longer aligned with who you're becoming. When you feel that internal disassociation, when you feel like you're on autopilot, and you feel like you're not getting ignited by your life and instead you're getting depleted by it, those are clear indications that you are outgrowing the life that you are in. And it can feel very unsettling and confusing when you get into this space. I recall, like I said, having to ask myself, first having to stop and say, this doesn't make sense. Everything that I wanted, I'm getting and I'm achieving, yet I feel empty. It feels hollow. It doesn't bring the satisfaction and the joy that I thought it would. And there's almost a depression associated with that. The disassociation for me caused me to feel like I was in a state of just being unhappy, but it didn't make sense why I would feel unhappy. In that space, I had to stop and say, what's going on here? And if I feel like I'm living someone else's version of my life, then whose version am I living? And as I started to ask myself that question, and as you start to ask yourself that question when you're in this space, what'll often come up is childhood pressure and expectations that were placed on us. You may be drawn back to ancestral things like family businesses or roles that your family has held throughout time, doctor, 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 down the history line. It may also be societal pressure. There's expectations and respect and recognition that come with certain titles and certain roles that are embodied in society and in the world. And there can be a fear and a feeling that if I don't have those roles, and if I don't have those titles, and if I don't have that money, then I don't have the respect and recognition and validation from outside sources. So those are all clear indications of outgrowing what you used to want, and also of realizing that you're following something that wasn't fully yours to begin with. And when you get to that space, it can be very difficult to let go and walk away. A lot of times what comes up is you start to think about all the time that you put maybe into school, into interning, into being in the profession, into climbing the ladder. And how can you just walk away from all that, especially into something that you don't even know what it is or if it's going to work out. I've been there in those spaces where I feel like I'm being called towards something, or I can feel something that feels more aligned that I want to go after, I want to do. But it takes time, energy, and effort to do it. And the thought that I've often had is, if I put that time, energy, and effort into it and it doesn't work out, then what? At least I have what I have here, at least I have what I've worked towards. And that's a lot of times what ends up keeping us stuck in an outgrown place. It can also be a fear of being uncomfortable, because you have to live in a space of uncertainty, which I talked about in my last video, that in-between space, the meantime. That's the space that you have to inhabit when you admit to yourself that you have outgrown the life you used to want, and start to sit with, well, what is the life I do want for myself? It's hard, very difficult to walk away from something that looks not only good, but that looks like something that everyone else would want from the outside, but doesn't fit you on the inside. You can be labeled as the black sheep of the family. You can be looked at as crazy. You can be looked at as not fully thinking things through. Those are all things that happen, and fear that keeps us stuck within this space. However, when you get to this space, it's not that you've done anything wrong, it's that you've outgrown the person you were and are being called to step into the person who you will become. And so this space is a reminder that nothing we build is permanent. Nothing is meant to last forever. Sometimes the things that we were certain we wanted are goals and dreams and paths that are put within us to help us go down a road that allows us to have certain experiences and learn certain lessons that then prepare us for the pivot or the realignment back to things that are more aligned and that take us into our next phase, our next path, into our future. If you're in this space, know that although it feels uncomfortable and unsettling, there is a way out. And know that taking time to sit within yourself and starting to follow what feels right for you, what feels authentic for you, and what feels aligned for you, step by step. You don't have to blow up the whole place at once, but if you start following step by step, it'll start leading you towards things that do ignite you, things that you are passionate about, things that align with your ultimate destiny and who you're becoming. Sometimes the most aligned thing you can do is to let go and to open yourself up to what's seeking to come in. Hopefully, this resonated with you. And if it did, take some time to really sit with it and reflect upon it. And then join me here again next week for another conversation.